Chicago, Dr. Martin Steiner and his research team are working on a massive particle collider, when suddenly, the machine experiences a critical malfunction. This triggers a catastrophic explosion, leading to mass destruction. Thousands lose their lives instantly, and millions more suffer severe injuries. Following the disaster, Chicago is completely sealed off and classified as a restricted zone. Strangely, eerie, ghostly figures start to appear across the area. Known as remnants, these are the visual echoes of those who perished in the explosion. Although they look exactly like their former selves, they are unable to interact with reality and pose no threat to the living. These remnants exist only for a few seconds, endlessly repeating their last actions. For instance, a remnant cycling today will be seen doing the same thing tomorrow. Let's just hope none of these remnants were caught in any embarrassing situations. The film then jumps ahead to 10 years later, where we find ourselves in a town just outside Chicago. Even here, the explosion claimed many lives, and remnants continue to appear daily. We are introduced to Veronica, a 17-year-old girl who lives with her mother, Anna. Her father was one of the victims from that tragic day and now appears each morning in his remnant form at breakfast. At school, her physics teacher, August Bittner, gives a lecture on the phenomenon of remnants. Veronica curiously asks why people from other timelines are suddenly becoming remnants. She points out a girl who is clearly dressed in 80s fashion as an example. However, Bittner has no explanation for this occurrence. During lunch, Veronica finds herself watching a guy named Kirk, a loner who seems obsessed with remnants. Rumor has it he was expelled from his previous school, though no one knows the details. Later that evening, while Veronica is in the shower, a mysterious remnant suddenly appears, startling her. Then, something eerie happens. The unknown remnant writes the word "run" on the bathroom mirror, which shouldn't be possible since remnants are mere projections. The next day, a frightened Veronica approaches Bittner and asks to speak with him in private. He agrees and invites her to his home. Upon arriving, they encounter his daughter Eva, who gives them a cold reception and quickly walks away. Veronica then shares the unsettling experience from the previous night, which has deeply disturbed her. However, Bittner insists that what she describes is impossible, as remnants can't interact with the physical world. He suggests that she might have hit her head during the incident, causing her to hallucinate. So far, Bittner isn't proving to be very helpful. Later, Veronica turns to Kirk for help, knowing he's knowledgeable about remnants. She follows him to a cave where hundreds of fish remnants are swimming around. Kirk explains that during the rainy season, this tunnel floods and becomes a habitat for various aquatic creatures. He visits the spot daily to watch the fish remnants, noting that their numbers are increasing. This implies that even newly deceased fish are transforming into these entities. After leaving the tunnel, Veronica wastes no time and asks Kirk to help her figure out the identity of the remnant that appeared in her bathroom. At first, Kirk refuses, saying that he is busy, but when she promises to do his assignments for him, he agrees. Later at school, as they are brainstorming ways to find a solution, Veronica inadvertently calls the remnant Brian. When asked how she knows that name, she has no answer. Kirk then says that for them to start the research, they need to take a picture of Brian. Since ordinary cameras aren't capable of doing that, they will need a spectrographic lens. However, the problem is that these cost millions of dollars. Fortunately, Veronica has a friend who can set up a makeshift spectrographic lens. Using normal tools, she should probably monetize that, says Kirk. The duo then installs the camera in the bathroom and waits for Brian to arrive. After a while, he shows up, and the lens appears to be affecting him. He then lunges at Veronica, but at the same time, the lens shatters, causing him to disappear. Although it was a tense encounter, Kirk managed to capture a picture of him. He then does some research and learns about Brian's horrific past. The following day at school, Kirk reveals to Veronica that Brian was a serial killer who abducted and murdered a local girl named Mary. To find more information, they then visit Mary's mother. The latter says that Brian stalked his daughter for weeks and eventually persuaded her to come with him. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. She was found dead later that night, while Brian committed the unthinkable the next day. In the next scene, we see Veronica and Kirk researching in the school library. After putting together all the clues, they discover that Mary was killed on her birthday. It was the 29th of February, also known as leap year. Coincidentally, Veronica also has the same birthday, which makes her think if all the events might be related. As the two are chatting, a mysterious figure appears behind them. Then, the lights start to flicker, and Veronica drops her book. When she picks it up, she finds the word "run" scribbled several times. Surely he could have used some of that real estate to provide more detail. The following day, Kirk is called to the school office where the principal inquires why he visited Mary's mother. He says that it was for an assignment, but the principal doesn't believe it. Elsewhere, we see Veronica at a basketball game. She tries to contact Kirk desperately, but he doesn't respond. Simultaneously, we see the principal heading up the stairs after he receives a text from someone. At the basketball court, Veronica starts seeing the mysterious Brian in various locations. At one point, he stands on the other side of the court, so Veronica gets up from her seat and tries to reach him. She doesn't even realize that she is interfering with her play. When she finally snaps out of it, something shocking happens. The principal suddenly falls through the roof, leaving everyone terrified. Later, Kirk visits Veronica at her house and explains that he had told the principal his entire theory. He suspects that the poor man was killed because of it. However, Veronica believes that it was just an accident. As the two continue chatting, Kirk reveals that he started researching the remnants because he never got to say goodbye to his father. The latter suddenly passed away due to the explosion, and his remnant has never shown up. So, Kirk hopes that he can learn more about the phenomenon and contact his father someday. That night, Veronica experiences an unsettling nightmare where she sees Brian trying to grab her. She also experiences falling into an icy lake where two female ghosts are casually swimming. When she wakes up, Anna enters her room and mentions that she will be traveling to another city for a job interview. She will only be able to return in 3 days. This makes Veronica sad as her mom is going to miss her birthday. And her birthday only happens once every 4 years. Later, as the remnant dad is sitting in his usual breakfast position, Kirk notices something strange. He sees that the man is holding a newspaper, which was published 3 years after the explosion took place. The main headline is about the disappearance and murder of 2 girls, Emma and Claire. Kirk quickly notes down the details and begins researching them. He soon learns that they also had their birthdays on the 29th of February and were killed on the same day. In the next scene, the duo meets an acquaintance who reveals that Brian and Claire were in a relationship. Claire actually died in the same laboratory from which the explosion originated. Her death was so gruesome that many tourists flocked to the lab to witness her remnants' recreation of the death. Hearing this, Veronica and Kirk are perplexed, and they wonder what Claire and Brian were doing in the lab. To find more information, they decide to head to Chicago. That evening, they arrive at the desolate city, which has been completely overrun by the remnants. Here, the entities last for hours, and their population is huge. This is perhaps due to the fact that Chicago is ground zero, and whatever is bringing the remnants has more influence here. Ignoring this, the duo heads to the laboratory, where several people are witnessing Claire's remnant in action. The woman appears to be scared, and she climbs a set of ladders, possibly trying to escape. However, she is caught and strangled mercilessly. Just then, Kirk notices Dr. Martin Steiner among the crowd and calls out his name. The latter, who appears to be living anonymously, tries to flee the scene, but the two eventually catch up to him. They grill him for answers, and he reluctantly decides to speak up. Martin takes them to his main lab and explains that when an explosion takes place, a dead person's echo is left behind. He gives them an example by showing the shadow of the deceased people left behind by the Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims. Dr. Martin explains that these echoes are a doorway that connects the living people to the dead. His team used this theory and treated numerous people who were on the verge of death. However, their main goal was to resurrect a totally dead person. For this, they needed a live person with the exact birth date of the person they wanted to reanimate. The process was called spectral transfusion. However, their experiment was unsuccessful, and it resulted in the catastrophic explosion that took many lives. Dr. Martin then reveals that Brian, one of his assistants, worked with him on the project. However, when Claire was killed, Brian changed. The doctor theorizes that Brian killed the other victims with the same birthday so that he could resurrect Claire through spectral transfusion. Meanwhile, Kirk steals a photograph from the lab so he can research it later. Dr. Martin then confirms that whatever the government is telling them is not true. The remnants can indeed alter the present, and they are a threat to the living. Hearing all of this, Veronica wonders if Brian is trying to kill her as she also shares the same February 29th birthday. She tries to ask for more information, but the doctor, riddled with guilt, abruptly commits the unthinkable. In the next scene, the duo returns to the school to investigate further, but as soon as they arrive, some officials apprehend Kirk. They have found a gun in his locker. Desperate for help, Veronica approaches Bittner and explains the entire situation. Luckily, he believes her this time, as he has already talked to Mary's mom, and because it's about time he did something. He then reveals that Brian was kicked out from his previous school because they discovered a gun in his locker there, just like today. This makes Veronica suspicious of him, so she decides to ignore him from now on. But the problem isn't solved yet. Since the 29th of February is tomorrow, Veronica assumes that Brian is going to kill her. Fortunately, Bittner has a solution. He offers to design a special room in her house where she can be safe. This room will be enclosed with lead lining, which apparently keeps the remnants out. Veronica knows that she doesn't have any other options, so she promptly agrees. Meanwhile, Anna reaches the said job location, but learns that no one had called her. Someone actually played a dirty prank on her. That evening, Kirk pays Veronica a visit and tries to talk to her, but she acts cold. Out of frustration, he reveals that he had carried the gun in his previous school to protect himself, not to harm others. However, he has no idea who placed the gun in his locker yesterday. Still, Veronica doesn't want to talk, so she asks him to leave. The two work for hours and finally design the special room. Veronica is asked to spend the night there until the danger is over. Meanwhile, Kirk researches the picture he took from the lab and makes a startling discovery. It turns out that Bittner was also one of the scientists in Dr. Martin's team. This makes Kirk realize that the man is up to something evil. He desperately tries to contact Veronica but fails because there's no network in the room. With no other options, he rushes to save her. As soon as Kirk arrives outside the house, he notices Bittner's daughter, Eva's remnant. This reveals that she is not a real human after all. Following this, the movie goes into a flashback where all the mysteries are unraveled. During that fateful day, Eva was also in the laboratory, and Bittner tried his best to save her, but failed. Due to her demise, he blamed himself day and night, and that's when he came up with the idea of reanimating her using spectral transfusion. For this, he kidnapped several girls, including Claire, but each of his experiments failed. When Brian got to know of this, he tried to warn Mary, but he ended up dying at the hands of Bittner as well. After this, the evil professor changed his name and started working at the school so that he could get personal records of the students. When he finally discovered that Veronica is a February 29th birthday, he planned to use her for spectral transfusion. It turns out that Bittner was the one who placed the gun in Kirk's locker and called on her for the interview. Back to the present, as Kirk tries to contact the police, Bittner arrives from behind and knocks him out. He then buries Kirk alive. After this, he returns to the special room where Veronica is staying. She is still unaware that Bittner wants to kill her. However, when she gets a cut on her finger, she remembers that she had a vision of the same thing. She then puts two and two together and realizes that the visions were trying to warn her, which means Bittner is a red flag. Scared, she tries to run away, but the evil guy catches up to her. He is about to finish her off, but just then, Veronica's dad appears, which distracts Bittner for a moment. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she hits him with one of her skates and runs outside. However, he once again catches up to her and tries to strangle her. When there's nowhere to go, Veronica breaks the ice beneath him, causing both of them to plummet into the freezing water. But even there, Bittner continues to strangle her. He is about to kill her, but right then Brian's remnant arrives and frees Veronica. Simultaneously, the remnant of Mary also appears and drags Bittner down, finally killing him in the aftermath. Veronica reaches the surface, but she is too weak to rise up. Fortunately, Kirk arrives just in time and saves her. It is revealed that when he was under the ground on the verge of death, his father's remnant showed up and dug him out. Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.